It's tabletop time, and I'm Dave. You're here because you have seen our official face reveal. That's right, this little guy's face. Today we're going to be basically chatting about how to paint faces in Warhammer 40k and any other miniature game you can come across. It's probably a little bit intermediate to advanced with just some of the techniques used, but really it just requires patience and a bit of practice to pull across. And I think that I've tried to steer towards painting in a way that is achievable by people who are used to painting with sort of the Games Workshop method without adding too much over the top flair in terms of like millions of glazes and blending and proper like true art color theory, etc. The first step to painting our miniature was picking a range of skin tones. I had what was effectively just in front of me, which seems to be kind of like a tan Caucasian male set of skin tones. And I fairly quickly set about just blending between two of those standard Games Workshop paints to get a bit of a gradient that I would work across as I built up the highlights on his skin. So straight away I set to setting out those darker base colors on the model. I start to painting actually the sides of his head as well. I didn't just stay and paint the face because I knew that with the hair so closely cropped and shaved to the scalp on this model that it would be important to have a little bit of those sort of skin tones coming through underneath just to give that realistic sort of depiction of him having, well, his hair over the top. You'll notice that I immediately go to the terrifying pain of white scar. And at this stage, I am going to dive in on those eyes. It's something that I've started doing recently where I realized that, hey, let's paint the really hard parts of the model first. So I put the white in, but I wasn't too careful because around the eyes, we have a lot of pink. So what I generally do is I put a wash into the eyes fairly heavily and let that settle everywhere except the very sort of middle of that white dot. Now, rather than painting a matte color on the sides of the head, I decided to do a technique which is known as stippling. So that's basically where you get a flat-ended brush and it's almost the cousin of dry brushing. Rather than sort of brushing over edges, you kind of stab the model gently with the tip of the brush, which sort of lets a very rough pattern of paint form over the model. So I built up the undertone of skin, the shaved head look, using stippling. And I went back and used a couple of different grays while I did that to try and build up a little highlight on the head as well. At this stage, it was time to move back to the skin. So I built up several highlights using that spectrum of flesh tones that I'd created on the wet palette. Going back and forth, I just picked out the raised areas such as the cheekbones and the brow, and I began to highlight them, building up as you would using the standard method to a relatively satisfying highlight. It was time to paint inside that yowling maw of a mouth that I'm quite sure is shouting, "For the Emperor!" It was kind of difficult. This is one of the more touchy parts of the model to get that balance between looking realistic but also getting enough distinction between the lips and the tongue that it was obvious what they were. In there, we also had the teeth. The way teeth are sculpted on this scale, if they are sculpted at all, is obviously just a single sort of sheet, a single tooth, one large jaw-shaped tooth. So I painted that on the top, and he kind of had a really bad chipmunk vibe going. So I got in there with my fine detail brush, and I painted my own lower teeth, and I think it really helped. Looking at it on the close-up monitor, again, I wasn't quite happy. So something you can barely even see on the naked eye is I was silly enough to go back and individually paint his upper teeth. Yeah, I got there. I think I got like 4 or 5 little dots, and if you do look closely, you can see the distinction, and it's worth it. I really like it. I went back a few times with the eyes to try and get the pupils right. The first one is almost always easy because that sets where the direction the model's looking. Unless you have a really specific desire to have the model looking in an exact direction, it is quite easy to just sort of guess away that his eyes have darted to the side or up. But once you've set that first eye, the second one has to match. So I went back once or twice to just tidy that up. And I think overall, I'm pretty happy with the eyes. Something that I have only just started painting on my models is the eyebrows. So we got to eyebrow land. I have painted so many miniatures over the years, especially as a kid, where I just painted the brow and highlighted it because it was this nice, safe highlight zone of obvious ridge on miniature. But as I've gotten better, I've gone, wait a minute, humans have eyebrows. So with this model, I did a sort of a glaze in the shape of the eyebrow and then refined it with a darker gray just in the center of that glaze. I'm happy with the result, and I encourage you out there to try and apply the subtle facial hair to your models at home. I painted eyelashes. Why did I paint eyelashes? You can't even really see them, but hey, I know it's there, and that's what matters. With the eyebrows, eyelashes, and all the subtle ridiculousness of this model done, I grabbed my Carroburg Crimson Oh no, Jazza doesn't have Carroburg Crimson. I'm so used to leaping towards Carroburg Crimson when I paint skin tones because it's just so good for getting in that little reddish tinge. But I had to kind of make my own with what I had on hand, and it worked serviceably. So I applied that a bit more liberally over his cheeks and the sides of his nose. I wanted to give him a bit of a flushed look, like he's shouting and aggressive and the blood's rushed to his face. So he does have a bit more red tone in those areas of his face. And especially from the side profile, I think the red on the nose really helps. Finally, we had the hair and the weird service stud thing. I don't know. If you're a space marine and you serve for a century, they bolt a stud into your skull. It's a fine reward for service. So I highlighted that in like the subtlest and tiniest version of silver non-metallic metal I could muster, just trying to do the general sphere highlighting on it, but it was so tiny it barely shows. And with the hair, I followed Squidmar's really cool method. When I watched his video on highlighting and painting hair, I was like, that speaks to me, which is to effectively, instead of highlighting hair in the way that you highlight the rest of the model, highlight hair in the way that hair operates. It's very reflective and semi-transparent, the individual strands, so the light reflection actually is very dependent on the position of the viewer.
All right, there it is.
I hope you enjoyed my little deep dive into painting a face in any miniature painting. I guess if you want to see more stuff like this, let us know. If there are like topics that you guys would love to see, or if you liked this idea for a video format as an ongoing series of things that we do occasionally, let us know in the comments, please. Thank you to all the patrons. We really appreciate it. Your support allows us to make this cool content and bring it to you. So I'm so thankful for everyone out there. Thank you so much to all the scrolling patrons. And also, you know, the usual. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. The 3 important metrics that tell YouTube other people should watch our video. So with that said, until you next are in need of a fix of Mini Monday or a little bit of painting, I don't know, have fun, paint models, paint more minis. That's a really good no, that's taken. Don't smash models with a hammer.
But mine are from the